And here we go.
Right.
Some stories aren't just written, they're pulled from bone, marrow, and memory. My guest tonight doesn't just write scripts, he excavates truth and builds it as a story. Screenwriter, author, publisher, filmmaker, and a man who believes art isn't about fame, it's about survival. Tonight, we're talking about the man behind Blackbone Jones and Two for Pain. Welcome to the Dark Mic, James Moore.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Woo! So we've had this going on for a hot minute, and we've been kind of like going back and forth, checking each other out. We met on TikTok. Give us a little
Yes.
background about. Let's give a little bit of background about the TikTok, and then we're going to delve into who you are, what you do, and the exact reason why we should pay attention.
Well, on TikTok, I'm affectionately known as Uncle James. I'm an indie author advocate as well as an indie author myself. Um, I also support a number of different communities, and I spend most of my time trying to be not only an educational voice, but an inspirational one as well. Letting people sort of live vicariously through the ups and downs and the trials and tribulations of my own life, so that they don't fall into the same pitfalls, and they always have something to look forward to every day that keeps them motivated to to do everything that we got to do in this crazy industry.
I know everything goes in on kind of like short bursts, and you have to do things to be able to bring their attention, keep their attention, and then want them to come back and get
Yeah,
more from you, especially in a feature like TikTok. What is
yes,
that
yes.
like for you? How do you go about planning, or do you plan what you're going to do uh, for your forward movement?
So I've got a number of advantages that some folks have. I have a very commanding voice. I've done radio and done some music stuff in my previous life, so that helps when I do my my morning coffee with Uncle James as a motivational moment. Then among the other branded content that I create, I have Uncle James's Horror Vault where I talk about old horror movies, and then Connecting with Friends is a series that I created where I connect with one of my friends on TikTok, ask them 3 questions, hoping that they'll respond with a video response. And it helps them get to know me get to know them, and for all of my followers and their followers to come together and continue to build on community.
I love that. Often when I do interview, I ask questions like that, and the response can be sometimes humorous, and sometimes very serious, and then
Yeah.
sometimes they really have to think about what they want to respond to you with. And if they are doing it, of course, in a video response, I'm sure that you can get a varied amount of responses that make
Oh
some
yeah.
great content.
It does. It does indeed.
Okay, so at what moment in your life made you realize that storytelling wasn't just a hobby, but it was survival?
Ooh. Gosh. Well, I started telling stories or developed a love for telling stories at a very, very young age. After reading a story by Truman Capote in Esquire magazine, that kind of got me hooked. And from there, um, writing has become writing has always been my life. It's just that one thing that you can't get away from, you can't ever escape. You can leave it for a little while, but it's like always in the back of your mind, always that one thing that's constantly like, you should be doing this, you should be doing this, and recognizing and embracing it as a gift that is not necessarily for me alone, but something to share with the world through, the stories that I tell. Most writers, their work is a reflection of their own lives in a lot of ways, all the trials and tribulations, or writing as a catharsis for, what we've experienced through the characters that we create.
Yes. So you wrote a screenplay. And in this
Yes, I did.
screenplay, did you see yourself being a screenwriter or a storyteller uh, who hadn't
Very
found
interesting
the
question.
right medium yet?
So I initially started out as an author. And that was kind of like the thing that I was like, yeah, this is going to be my legacy plan, to be an author. Um, and I was actually working. I had a business where I was making music for fitness competitors and bodybuilders. I would produce and arrange their music for their routines. And one of my clients brought over her trainer, and he and I just got into this really in-depth conversation about movies and TV shows that we liked and everything. And the next thing I knew, he'd asked me, "So have you ever thought about like making a film or writing a film?" And I'm like, "I wouldn't even know what that looks like." But 6 months later, we created the very first short that I did, and it was the new drug. You know,
I
I
did so when that happened for you, it was like maybe you didn't quite sure know exactly what clicked, but you knew you were hooked.
I knew that I had stepped into something that even though I didn't have enough information about it, um, I was very intrigued by it, and I wanted to see where it would go. Subsequently, from that, I realized that I didn't know enough to like really do it justice. I didn't know enough, so I sat on a journey to learn as much as I could about screenwriting, about what it took to write a film or TV show.
Hey, let's
Uh,
delve into that because that's like a lot of times people will say, "All right, so I want to do this screenplay thing, and I got an idea, but I don't know what the heck to do." So what did you, being a complete novice in screenwriting, what did you do?
So I had heard about this gentleman by the name of Robert McKee, who taught a seminar. It was a 3-day seminar based on his book Story, and did some research and found out, that he's been around. He'd been teaching people screenwriting for years. I had no clue what I was getting into when I went to that conference, because here I am, all young, doe-eyed, and full of hope and inspiration. And we got the beat down of a lifetime in that 3 days.
I
Because
remember I remember the story that you told me the first what did he say in our pre-interview? You told me this glorious story. What did they
so
say to you when you first sat down in that room?
so like me and the other couple of hundred people that were there, we were all expecting this, like, "Oh, hi, welcome," and this nice kind of thing. We got none of that. Literally, he walked up to the podium, he opened his book, opened his notes, put on his glasses. He stared at us for like a minute, like an angry stare. And I'm kind of paraphrasing here. Basically, he says, "Listen, if you came here thinking that this is your, like, you're going to spend 3 days here and then next week you're going to go out and write a script and make $1 million, you need to get rid of that dream right now. You need to stop being foolish. You need to stop being childish, and you need to wake up to the realization that it's going to take you blood, sweat, and 10 years before you may even sell anything. And if that is something that you're not willing to do," and this part is exactly what he said, "then I advise you to get up, go see my girl at the desk, and get a refund and go home." He didn't
Damn.
say a word. He did not say a word after that. But let me tell you, if a pin would have dropped in that moment, it would have sounded like a grenade going off. Like, nobody moved. We were just like, "Oh my God." But I knew from that moment, I'm like, "Okay, challenge accepted. I'm in. I'm here for it. This is what we're doing. Let's go. Bring it on. I'm ready for it."
Have you to date said anything like that to anyone who has approached you about the process of writing screenplay? I need
I
to
have to
know. Inquiring minds need to know.
I have to be 100. I have to be 100% honest. Yes, I do. I 100% do. Listen, the thing that I tell anyone coming into this business is to make sure you don't have any blinders on. This profession is not for the weak at heart. It's not for the skittish. It's not for people who like set stuff on a calendar for a certain date, and if they don't did it by that date, that then they're just like, blame everything. I'm like, if you put it on the calendar and expect to be a screenwriter by a certain date, you may as well go home now.
Right. Because it
This
takes,
business will break your heart. It
yes,
will it will it will tear you in pieces. But if you stick with it, if you truly believe that you have the gift, if you truly believe in the gift that you have, you can make it. But you're going to put in a lot of work before you climb to the top of that mountain.
I want to go and show a couple of clips during this particular segment.
Mhm.
And bear with me. The one clip that I have does have a very small screen to it. Done everything I possibly can to make it bigger, but
Sure.
we're going to have a discussion about it. Let's get it onto the screen, and let's make sure I got all the sounds working. Everything up. All right, here we go.
The year is 1865. The Civil War has ended, but a darker battle is just beginning. In a land haunted by restless spirits, there is one man who walks between the world of the living and the damned. Cursed towns, restless spirits, and ancient evils. In a place where lawmen fear to tread, only Blackbones Jones has the courage to face what lurks in the shadows. A journey through the haunted plains of the Old West, where legends are forged, battles are fought, and the souls of the lost cry out for salvation. Blackbones Jones from acclaimed author James Maurer. A novel that will chill your bones and set your heart racing. Ride into the darkness and discover the legend.
I have a second clip too that I would like to show.
Sure.
I get chills every time I see that. And I want to know, like a lot of others, more about this story about Black Bones Jones. And you initially, when we were first talking about it, I thought it was a book gone to screenplay, but you started off as a screenplay. So let's talk about Black Bones Jones.
So, and thank you. I love both of those pieces. Um, Black Bones Jones started out as an idea that was born out of I wanted to write something really strong, really powerful, but I didn't want to make like the Black Captain America or the Black Superman because there were so many scripts at the time that were like, oh, well, we need our own this and we need our own that. And, so many people fighting for that audience, that space, if you will, where, Marvel had done so well and DC has done as well as also. But I wanted to go someplace where there wasn't a lot of competition and in a place where I could tell a story that was based on facts, based on stuff that had happened during that time in the Old West, but was purely fictional, and I could introduce the world to a character that would be almost like he's the one thing, he's the last thing that people think that they would need, but the one thing that they absolutely need if they're going to survive. So always back to the theme of survival with that. Um, Jones is not the stereotypical bitter black man. He's not that. He understands what he has, what he is, and how to navigate the landscape to do what he does for people who a few years ago would have looked at him the same way they looked at cattle, but now have to like literally come to him hat in hand to beg him for help. And he's not um he's not geometrically opposed to people, but he makes it very clear that there's no illusions here about who you are and who I am. Doesn't mean I'm not going to help you, but we understand each other. So he's very forthright in that regard. He's also one of my favorite characters to create because I get to do something with Black Bones Jones I never got to do with any character. I allow Black Bones Jones, the story itself, to sort of mold and shape from all of the stuff from history that I learned about that time to really create his voice. And his voice is not one of anger, but of rage against evil, not necessarily a person or a particular group of people, but just against evil itself.
Your story walks between folklore, horror, history, and spiritual warfare. Let's
Yes.
get into that.
So I like to consider myself a spiritual person. I hate religion as a construct because of what it's been used for to demoralize, diminish, and basically rob human beings of their rights. What I found was interesting in creating the lore and the history of Black Bones Jones is that it forced me to answer a question, which was if all of known religion itself from the beginning of time has come from the African content, why wouldn't those people know about it before anybody else?
Right.
And that became like a constant question in my head. And as I started doing research into ancient tribal customs and how they approached faith, it was much different than the way that we do it. And the spiritual connection is passed down not just through the word or written word or spoken word. It was mostly spoken word, but it's passed down through the blood. So when you tie that to how we see the history of the Bible, everything comes back to the blood. It made sense.
Yes.
Um, and so the folklore came from, actually, because I studied a little Greek mythology, came from Pandora, right? In that, what if you took a group of people, brought them to this strange land, tried to exploit their customs or their faith, not knowing what you were doing, and you brought forth or summoned these creatures that didn't recognize you because they were expecting someone else.
I love that. That's
And
deep.
you put the genie back in the bottle when the genie doesn't know who you are. And so that led to a huge discovery in putting all of that together. And Black Bones Jones technically would be considered a Buffalo Soldier, so there's a lot of that involved in the story. I delved a lot into the practices of the Choctaw Nation during that time, and found very, very interesting enough that there were a lot of times when both the blacks of that time and the Choctaw protected and intermingled with one another just for survival. And so that became a mainstay in the story, that the Choctaw women were leaders in their communities. They weren't, as we've seen them portrayed in a lot of TV shows and movies. They were actually the ones leading the people, guiding the people. And so it meant something for me to be able to bring that element into Black Bones Jones because I felt it gave the story overall a greater sense of authenticity.
What was the first image or idea that gave birth to Black Bones Jones? The evil? the sheriff, or Jones himself?
It was Jones himself. And actually, I imagined a cowboy that you can't see his face, but you see him in a silhouette, and he's surrounded by fire, but it doesn't burn him. And that was the first image I had of Black Bones Jones.
Is the evil in your book more of an external monster or a metaphor for something human that spreads quietly?
The evil in Black Bones Jones is something that affects humans. So even though like there are characters that are clearly the bad guys, right? The overall um the overall darkness in this story is evil itself and how it twists and corrupts human beings. Um it's actually in a lot of respects, Black Bones Jones is kind of like a tragedy because the story behind the story is about a tragedy that occurred to this group of Choctaw people that has gone unavenged until now.
What was the most emotionally dangerous scene for you to write, and why?
Ooh. So, and it's also the most pivotal for me. So there's a moment where, well, let me set it up. So this is like not very long after slavery had ended, the Civil War was ended, and it was like within that first year. So even though slavery had been abolished, the word had not gotten out like all over the country. There were still pockets and places where people were still being held as slaves, and folks who were capturing, freed people and taking them to places where the folks didn't know that slavery no longer existed. So there's one scene where um, Jones and Poole is the sheriff that, comes to him and says, I need your help, where they're camping and Poole goes to relieve himself in the woods. And Jones is approached by a group of slavers who think that he's just this black man alone in, just sitting at camp that they can just grab up and, take him wherever they're going to take him. And in that moment, Poole returns and Jones has to play along that he is Poole's slave. And it takes everything in him to sort of go along in the moment until the slavers leave, and then he explodes afterwards. And he's not really angry at Poole. He's angry that this situation is still happening even after slavery has allegedly ended. So it was a heavy duty scene, and I think I rewrote it like 4 or 5 times because I wanted the dialogue to not to emphasize or to point out the fact that um we can see what's happening, and I'm like beating a dead horse over the slavery and the racism. But there's a moment where at the end of it, uh Jones Poole tries to apologize to Jones, and Jones responds, it ain't on me to forgive you, or no, ain't on me to judge you, but it ain't on me to forgive you either.
Did writing Black Bones Jones exercise anything for you?
Ooh, that's a great question. It did because as someone who was born in the 60s, grew up in the 70s, I saw a lot of the negative things that were going on, stuff that, still sort of ekes it out of the corners today. But at the same time, it taught me that there are people who are willing to stand up for what's right, to do what's right, even at great cost to themselves. And so that's always been something that's encouraged me and uplifted me. But I think being reminded that so vividly in this particular story, because it is still in a time where, like, you know, Jones doesn't even have the right to vote yet, right?
Right, yes.
Still not even considered a full human being, and still here come these people who desperately need his help. So it helped me sort of gain a better perspective, if you will, on not only the world at large, but like our role in it, and like what we do, and what we are all accountable for.
What did you want the readers to feel when they closed the last page? Fear, relief, empowerment, or warning?
Ooh, a little of all of that. Probably more so empowerment, because the one thing that I'm most proud of about the book is that not just Jones and Poole really stand out as very, very powerful characters. I took a lot of time really crafting them very particularly to show that these are two very unlikely heroes who by the end of the story become friends. But I also made sure that the women in the story were not secondary characters, right? They weren't just the people falling out. Like every time danger came, the women weren't passing out or fainting in the street. No, they were actively engaged and involved, and they had their own unique personalities, their own stories to tell within the story. And I'm most proud of the fact that all the three main women in the story have an arc very clear, have voices that are very distinctive, and their usefulness into everything that's happening is evident. And I think that that's important, again, because just as it's important to understand that how Black people shaped America during those days, a lot of women did too.
Yes. So I got a couple of rapid fire questions for you.
All right.
Is Jones a hero, a weapon, or a warning?
Ooh. Part hero, part weapon.
Does evil die or does it migrate?
Oh, evil always finds a way to come back, so it migrates.
Is horror safer than history?
Oh. There are times I honest to God believe that horror is history.
Blackbones Jones isn't just a story about saving a town, it's about confronting the ghost that built it.
Oh yes. Oh yes, absolutely. And it's also about a reconciliation, if you will. Because what Jones comes to realize is that there are things that even his abilities, his powers can't of their own overcome. And truth has to come out, and there has to be kind of a reckoning, if you will, that brings everyone peace, not just him, not just the town, but like the people who suffer from the atrocity that came before.
Now we're going to focus on screenplay and Blackbones
Mm,
Jones. All right, you ready?
I'm ready.
Awesome. Quietly intense, deliberate, emotionally intelligent. I want to talk to you about this not as a story, but as a construction. Not the emotion, but the architecture of how you put this screenplay together. When you first wrote Blackbones Jones as a screenplay, what was the film you saw in your mind? Not the genre, but the camera language. Were you writing wide angle or intimate?
So I leaned heavily on three films. Obviously, The Exorcist, for sure. But tonally and for visually, there's a Sidney Poitier film called Buck and the Preacher. And Buck influenced Jones a hell of a lot, because he's just this kind of stoic figure that is out trying to do the right thing, but knows he's up against some shady folks. And push comes to shove, he's not backing down. Um, the other film was, um, I always forget it. It's a Clint Eastwood film. Oh shoot. Oh gosh. It's the one where he goes into this town and they hire him to take on this band of outlaws that's supposedly coming back to this town. And he basically says, well, you're going to give me this, 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 and this if I'm going to protect you, only for them to realize later he was the sheriff that they betrayed. Why can I never remember the name of that film?
We'll get it in
Um,
post.
yeah,
No, don't worry about that. Um,
but yeah, but
yeah,
that played very heavily, especially when Jones gets to Menifee, knowing that he's going to come up against like people who are going to be looking down on him and wondering what is the sheriff doing bringing this black man to save our town? What's he going to do?
did you outline the screenplay ethically? Meaning, did you decide in advance what audience was allowed to see versus what they were simply allowed to feel?
I did not. I wanted the number one thing I wanted people to experience in the screenplay of Black Bones Jones is like I wanted you to know that I was bringing you to the razor's edge of some things that might make people very, very uncomfortable. But at the same time, do it in such an artful way where you don't feel as though I'm pointing the finger at you. I'm pointing the finger at the problems. I'm pointing the finger at evil, at racism and things like that. But I'm not pointing it at any one particular person, even with the bad guys.
In screenwriting, plot is often taught as king, but your story feels driven by presence rather than event. Did you build scenes around action or around moral pressure?
I definitely built the scenes probably around not only moral pressure, but around the characters themselves. Because the one thing about we knew what Jones's role was, but we didn't know that how this particular journey was going to affect and or change him. And that's the same for all of the characters, especially for Poole, because Poole, though himself was not a racist, he grew up in a time where he did what he was told, and so it was important for him to see that he had to have the strength to do what other men would not have been able to do. Most other men would not have been able to do what Poole did, which was to go and find Jones and say, "Will you please help my town?" That would have been far too much for them. So it shows a lot about the inner strength of this man and how as a character you get to see the evolution, this very gritty, dirty sort of evolution of the two of them coming together, and how when he learns about the real evil, not the racism or anything else, but about the real evil that's in the world, he's changed forever. And he has a better understanding, not of simply what Jones does, but what he carries in order to do this. And that makes them close, that brings them closer.
When you wrote it as a screenplay, you controlled time through cuts. When you turned it into a novel, you controlled time through language. Which gave you more power over the audience?
Oh gosh. It's gotta be the book. It's gotta be the book because there's a moment in the prologue where I talk about that which is known and the knowing. And that I think really, really sets up the world. Like we've always talked about like there's a physical world and then there's a spiritual world. But what the spiritual world really is a knowing, right? It's
Yeah.
having a sense of knowing about things that are there, that things are around us. This sense of like that third eye being open, and there are those people who are more attuned to that than others. And at the same time, there are those who are aware of these things, can access them, but will utilize the knowledge that they exist to manipulate other people. And so that's the battle that we lay down at the very beginning between that which is truth and that which is knowing.
In an intelligent horror screenplay, the danger is over explaining. How did you decide what to show and what to remain unseen?
One of the things that I tried to do was I wanted the reader to be able to experience not only the Jones's POV, being this black man with these supernatural abilities, but also the effect he had on other people that he came in contact with. And one of the ways that I did that was when Poole finds him, he's in the middle of an exorcism, um, helping this farmer family in Ohio exorcise a demon out of this farmer's wife. And so Poole gets to see firsthand. It's just like, whoa, this dude is really what I've heard he's all about, without even having to ask him. But I think the bigger thing for me was that there comes a moment in every story where everyone has their own sort of story to tell, all of the
Mm,
characters. And so you want to be able to recognize that you don't want them to specifically say outright what their agenda or their flaw or their thing is, but you want them to hint at it. And I think, like, with the mayor of the town, he there's a moment where he just tells you, I'm just a politician. I go the way the wind blows.
right.
And that's a that was one of those things that I wanted to put in both the script and the book. Just like, this is a reflection of even where we are right now. Like, most politicians are just like, whichever way the wind blows, that's going to make me look the best. That's the way they're going to do. So it felt very authentic in doing that. Like I said, I'm very proud of the women characters in the story, that have agency, and it's like, it's not something that we often hear about, but yet, you hear about, in history, women who wrote the Pony Express and did all of these amazing things. Many of their names have been forgotten in history, but here was an opportunity for me to bring them back and to
Yes.
really let them shine on their own, because it's that important that when you're reading the story, you can not only find people who look like me, you can find yourself in Black Bone Shows, no matter who you are.
Your dialogue carries weight. It isn't decorative, it isn't surgical. Were you writing to reveal information or to expose human weaknesses?
Both. And more so to expose human weakness than just information. The information that's revealed throughout the story is scatters in tiny bites that give you just enough to ask a question: why? Or what's really at the heart of this? So the first time Jones's powers fail him, it's not only a surprise to Poole and everyone around him, it's a surprise to Jones as well. And so it's like, why isn't this working? Why are these things happening the way they are? And what it becomes is, Jones now has to go from being just an exorcist to a detective and uncovering this mystery, right? It's still shrouded in this world of supernatural powers and everything, that, there's some information there that's revealed, but it's tapping into that emotional quotient that allows us to, like, oh my God, if this actually happened and those spirits are now restless, what did we do? What do we do?
When you write about exorcism and spiritual warfare, there's a fine line between exploitation and reverence. How did you protect the soul of the story while still making it cinematic?
One of the first things that happens when we first meet Black Bones Jones, we meet him as a child. We see him not as who he is, but we see him as a little boy, trying to defend his mother. And that was something that was important to me, because it goes to the heart of his who he is as a character, to his character for that matter. In that, um in a single moment when his mother, who is clearly the leader and the defender of her people, falls, that he doesn't shy away like a screaming child. He runs to aid her. And it's in that moment, what we're really seeing is he's sacrificing himself for her. He's putting himself on the line. And so it lets us know that what he is and who he is essential to family. And so, it's that big note in trying to make sure that when something bad comes against us, who's the first, who do we run to, or who do we run for, that allows us to try and do whatever. And so she's always been his shield. And in that moment, he becomes not only her shield, but the shield for everyone in his world now.
Do you think a screenwriter has a moral responsibility for what an audience emotionally carries after they leave the theater?
Oh, that's a good one. Uh, Kinda. Because, I think at the end of the day, you want to have people feeling satisfied that they took the time to read or watch your story, but also that they gained some insight from it at the same time. And throughout the story with Black Bones Jones, there's moments of insight between various peoples, different cultures, but also from a very human experience through the lens of the relationship between Jones and Poole, especially where they end up at the end of the story. And so you understand that through a shared trauma, they've created a bond between themselves that, even though they're going to, go their separate ways at some point, that bond is still going to be there.
Right. What is the question no one has ever asked you about Black Bones Jones that you've been waiting to answer?
The question that no one has asked me. Um, wow, that's a good one. I think the question that no one has asked me is why. Okay, here we go. The question is no one has asked me is about Jones's mother, and why that scene is probably the most important scene in the story for me. And the reason why is because um, it is a of itself kind of a metaphor of when I lost my own mother. And so that's a recurring theme in a lot of the stuff that I write. Um, a young man who has experienced the loss of his mother and now must carry that loss with him throughout the rest of his life. What does that look like? How does that affect you? And what does it make you become in taking you off the path that you thought you were going to be on and put you someplace you had no idea that you were going to be on? And that's a reflection of my own life.
You didn't just write a story, you designed a psychological experience, and that is much harder to do.
It is. It is. I felt it was important because, I went through 23 drafts of this script, and each time I kept leaning further and further away from just making it, oh, it's going to be this action packed, supernatural spells and demons and, cool stuff happening. I started moving further and further away from that, that I wanted it to be a more real and more human experience. And I didn't want Jones, even though he's very much in his own right a very macho character. He's not that typical, stereotypical, macho dude that we see. Oh, I'm going to go into town, I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to grab the women, and I'm going to, drink. No, I didn't want him to be that. And like the love scene between him and Odessa, it was important that it's her orchestrating it and basically taking the lead role in that rather than him, because I wanted to show that, like, this is her making her choice. This is her having her own agency in choosing who will and will not be her lover. And knowing what she has come to feel about Jones is something that isn't just like, oh, I just need a quick scene where he gets laid and then it's off to the next girl in the next town. I didn't want to Captain Kirk him. That's what I wanted to do. I didn't want to Captain Kirk him. I wanted there to be something more significant that came out of that.
Appreciate you. All right. Appreciate you for doing that too. We're into our next segment, and we're going to be talking about your next book, and that would be
Two for the Pain.
this way. That
Ah,
yes, that way. Stage right, stage left. I don't know. Which, give us a little bit of a background on Two for Pain, because it is such a different piece than your
yeah.
first work.
Yes. So actually, Two for the Pain came before Black Bones Jones, and I would definitely have to say Eddie Gideon is the character that is most closest to me. Like, there's a lot of me in Eddie Gideon. He is a very he's the kind of man that's certain in his own judgments. Um, he's not judgmental. Um, he's passionate, but astute. He's not the kind of guy that um, falls for the okey doke, but when he falls in love, he falls so hard. He falls so ridiculously hard. And in this story, after what he believes was the first time in a long time of him finding someone he could really fall in love with, he wakes up the next morning. There's police in his house. There's a guy with a gun in his face, and the woman in bed next to him is dead. And he doesn't have any clue how that happened. And so now not only does he have to clear his name, but in trying to find out who killed her, he unravels a deeper mystery, not realizing that she was not who she thought he was.
When you wrote Two for the Pain, were you trying to purge pain or preserve it?
That is the best question you've asked me tonight. Um, it's not really a complicated answer, but it was definitely about purging pain. The reason why is because when I initially started Two for the Pain, um, I had this idea that I wanted to write this cool, slick detective, private eye kind of guy. I wanted him to be that. I wanted him to be the stereotypical guy, for sure. That's what I wanted him to be. Um, and then tragedy struck um, with my mom, who lost her life due to domestic violence. And I spent the next, I want to say 2.5 years not writing anything at all. I just completely shut down. Um, but toward the latter end, I started having this recurring nightmare of just see the books behind me. Imagine each of those books is a prison cell, and I'm like in this prison with every unimaginable kind of sound and anguishable noise you could think of. But the dream would always end the same, in that I would end up in a room, standing in the middle of a circle with all of these people looking at me like with all kind of rage and anger, like I just shot their dog. And so after months, and yes, months of having this dream, I finally came to the conclusion, I got to figure this out. This is something that's trying to tell me something, and I need to pay attention. And so the last time I had the dream, I remember focusing on the faces of the people, and I got to one guy, and I recognized him immediately, and it was Eddie. And I sat straight up in bed and realized Eddie and all the other characters were telling me, I don't want to be in prison in your head. Let us out. And I went right back to working on Two for the Pain. It exercised my demons. It gave me clarity, and it helped me understand that, um, in a very spiritual sense, When you are given the gift to be able to write and create and tell stories, and you don't do it, ooh, bad things happen. Bad things will happen.
What do you hope someone will who what do you hope someone who is hurting takes from your work?
Um, I think one of the things that I would like for someone to be able to take from my work is that no matter what challenges or struggles that we go through, that there is always an opportunity for us to rise above it. And that may not be evident in the moment, but it is evident in our character. And with Eddie, he goes through a lot. He goes through loss on a couple of different levels. And he also learns something that's about being a black person and being hated by people who aren't necessarily or who are or who look like him, what that really means. And so there's a constant sense of him always feeling as though, or asking himself, what do I got to do to prove that I'm just as, as decent and normal as everybody else? But then realizing at the same time, it's like, nope, I'm just going to be better. And
Now we're
so
going to
that's what
yeah.
that's what I would want people to take away. It's like, no matter what your problem or circumstances or challenges that you go through, you will go through them and you will be better.
Now I'm going to kind of like take a deep dive into Two for the Pain. Are you ready?
Mm, I'm ready.
All right. I want to talk to you about this book, not as a crime story, but as a psychological excavation.
Mm,
You begin with a naked man,
mhm.
handcuffed, a dead body beside him, and no memory. Why did you choose to strip him physically and psychologically before giving him any power?
Because I needed to have him just in that position. I needed him to be completely naked and bare before the world before he put his armor on. Because the night before, again, he goes to bed believing he's he's in the safest place, in the safest moment he can ever imagine, and that's going to continue. And when he wakes up the next morning, everything is shattered. It is completely shattered. And so, from a psychological perspective, I put him in a place where he doesn't have time to really react, but he's got to be for himself now what he's been for everyone else that he knows. He has to be the detective. He can't be Eddie Gideon, the man. He can't be the tortured soul who just lost the woman of his dreams. He's got to push all of that down and be Eddie Gideon, the detective. And it's Eddie Gideon, the detective, that ultimately saves his life.
Do you believe memory protects us or betrays us?
Ooh, a little bit of both. I think dwelling too long on one particular thing hurts us, but being aware and recognizing that moment, but being able to catalog it and say, okay, I can look at this without diving too deep. I can see this as like it's a bottle of wine, but I don't have to drink it. I
Yeah.
recognize and I understand what it is, but I don't have to swallow the Kool-Aid.
You described the woman he loved as a lie dressed in silk stockings and pumps. Was the real betrayal the crime or the devotion?
Oh, the real betrayal was definitely the devotion, because Eddie would have changed he would have walked away from everything for her. He was willing to be that. But at the same time, um, in her own way, her devotion to him was the thing that ultimately became part of her undoing. Because if she'd have just stuck to the plan, they'd have probably gotten away with it.
The police department is divided. The district attorney has a personal vendetta. Was it important to you that the system itself felt unstable, not just the people inside it?
Oh, absolutely, because it's a reflection of where we currently are, and I think that that's one of those universal themes. It's like, we understand that none of the systems that we have in place are perfect, and a lot of them are probably far more broken than we realize. But that doesn't mean that there aren't people who are willing to set things straight, or do the right thing for the right reasons. Um, Jordan Taylor McRae, the DA, is fighting for all the right reasons. She just does not have all the right information. And Eddie's own past as a former cop adds to the animosity, because of the way that he was made a scapegoat.
You could have made this story loud. You didn't. You made it controlled. Why is it betrayal is often more terrifying than violence?
Um, I think because the reason why betrayal is far more terrifying than violence is because it never comes like a sledgehammer. It can come like a whisper, often something very subtle, unseen, or you know, um, even wrapped in a kiss, which is exactly what it was for Eddie. This was a betrayal wrapped in a kiss, in 3 Inch Pumps. And I think that makes the hurt all the more greater because it transcends the flesh. This goes to the heart and the spirit of this man, and it's not something that he could just like get over in a day.
When writing this, did you prioritize tension in what the readers see or in what they suspect?
Definitely in what they suspect. Because I did lay a few breadcrumbs that led down to some very false paths, but it never, because it's written in first person. You are always in Eddie's head, so you're never too far from his perspective on everything. And when the reader, there's some places in the story where the reader will go, "Oh no, Eddie, look this way," and Eddie doesn't. But then you realize it's like it wouldn't have mattered anyway, because even the way that Eddie went is wrong, and it's still part. You're still discovering along with him. It's just like, how is he getting this wrong? Why is this not working out for him?
Right.
And what's going to be that thing that finally flips the switch in his head?
Every writer hides a little autobiography in their work. Where does James Moorer live inside Eddie Gideon?
Oh gosh, there's so many moments of me and Eddie. Um, Eddie Eddie is like me in many respects. He's very like no nonsense. He's an Ohio State fan.
Yes!
He loves pancakes. Uh, and he's very loyal to his friends. And Eddie also loves to play the piano. And I'm a keyboard guy, but yeah, that was essential. Music is essential to Eddie.
Is that how he relaxed?
That is how he relaxes.
I love that about him. Do you believe betrayal is learned or is inevitable?
Ooh. In this case, it's learned. And I think, and that was the real blow for Eddie, is that uh his love did not come to she didn't organically learn betrayal. She'd been living a lie her entire life, but she was taught how to live that lie.
When readers close this book, what do you want them to question? The justice system, love, or themselves?
Love, believe it or not. Because for Eddie, this was like this was that moment, like you let your guard down. After keeping your guard up for so long, you finally let your guard down, and you think things are going to work out great, and they just go so horribly bad. But the thing I think that for Eddie, where he's he feels that the most isn't that it was just a betrayal to him, but it was a betrayal that cost another person their life, which is something that he can't abide with.
This was not just a mystery, it was a moral interrogation, and those tend to linger.
Yes, it was definitely that because um, his love interest is passing, meaning that she presents white, but she's actually black, and that plays a huge role.
I would love to talk about Hammerjack's films and give you a little bit of a break from the interrogation questions. Uh, let's talk about that. Give us a little bit of an understanding of how Hammerjack's films was formed and what your priority is for this.
So when I first came into the business and I got to work on a lot of different projects, a number of indie films, did a ton of background work on a number of television shows and got to learn about the business. One of the things that I was instructed very early on was like, as a screenwriter, you know, the hardest thing you're going to have come up against you is to get people to take the time to read. But if you actually create something that they can see, you can use that as your calling card. So I created Hammerjacks to basically be able to take some of the smaller stories that I was working on, um, and turn them into something that I could go, if I ran into someone at a party and they said, "Oh, where can I go see some of your work?" And I go, "Well, I just happen to have a 3-minute clip right here that you can check out on your phone." Um, and it taught me a lot in terms of producing and putting a project together and all of that. um I'm probably most proud of two projects that we created. One was a Stephen King dollar baby short called "In the Death Room" that I co-produced with my friend Nicole Jones Dion and her production company Praxis. And the other is a show called The Emergent Lens that is now on Roku. I just discovered yesterday.
Yes.
Um, that highlights um, emerging creatives, whether you're a writer, actor, or whatnot, um, and lets people know about you. And so I got to produce and to run set and everything, learn what it's like to actually produce something episodic. So that was a lot of fun. um, because of where we've been for the last year and a half, 2 years, we sort of like put Hammerjacks on the back burner. We haven't really been looking to put any new projects forward. However, going into 2026, I'm now taking a serious look at some of the feature projects that we're probably going to try and get financed and produced under that label, which again, still under horror and everything else. We want to do that.
I'm going to get this pushed over a little bit more and see what we can do here. There you go. This is another of yours. So let's talk about being an independent publisher with Dark Anthem Press.
So this came out of the writer's strike from last year. In that, um, having been in the industry as long as I have, I know a number of really, really, really talented writers who are struggle to get representation. Get their work in front of people who can get it made. And the overall question or the overall statement that everyone kept getting back was, "We like this, we like you, but we're only interested in intellectual property and IP." And the advice that I've been given by my own manager was like, "Oh, why don't you take Black Bones Jones and turn it into a book?" And I don't think that he realized how serious I was about it. And I said, okay, I'm going to do that. And so part of the reason why Dark Anthem Press came into being is one, my absolute love for horror, um, and two, to give my fellow screenwriters, should they choose to, an opportunity to be able to say, this is a story that I wrote as a screenplay that is also a novel that is actual intellectual property that I didn't self-publish, that actually came through a legitimate publishing company. So we set up and did everything, created did all the legal stuff to, to make it a legal company. And, looking forward to helping those screenwriters who want to turn a script into a book so they can have that leverage going into meetings. We want to give them that.
Right.
But it was also important for me to be able to prove that this model worked by doing Black Bones Jones, and obviously where it is right now and the traction it's gotten has proven that this is definitely a business model that can really help screenwriters as well as indie authors as well.
Cool. What does collaboration mean to you? Not just like working with people, but trusting them with your vision.
One of the things I would say that I've learned in, especially with Black Bones Jones, is that collaboration means a couple of things that a lot of writers may or may not necessarily be okay with. The first one is being able to give someone else a voice in a world that you created, meaning that, they get a say in the direction. But that's not always a bad thing, because sometimes, like I said, I went through 23 different rewrites on Black Bones Jones, the script. Sometimes having a different set of eyes on it that are equally engaged and equally passionate about the project can help you discover some things that you didn't necessarily see, or help you recreate or be able to amplify what the actual story is. So collaboration for me is is a business essential. Like, the way that I used to look at it was like very precious and possessive, which was the absolute wrong way. And now I look at it from more of a business standpoint. If you think of it like, um, McDonald's doesn't grow the potatoes that make the fries,
Right.
right? They have to get their fries from particular grower, that's special russet potatoes that they use. So they have to work in collaboration with those folks, from everything, for from the buns, the whole deal. But ultimately everyone benefits from a solid project. I recently sold a script that was not my own original idea. I was brought in to write it, but the people who created the story gave me a very gigantic free hand in developing and creating characters, world, situations. They gave me a, like, almost a full free hand with that. And had they been very possessive, it probably wouldn't have got done. But knowing that my job was to help them get this thing across the finish line, I understood that, like, hey, yeah, it's their story. They're letting me play in their sandbox, but we all want to see this thing get made at the end of the day.
Right.
And so they're allowing me to have an opinion in this thing that ultimately got made.
What do you give advice? What kind of advice do you give authors, artists, collaborate, any of these people who get into any of this, who want to build something, but they really feel alone? Because a lot of times, what we do as
Yeah.
creatives and artists, we do alone.
So the thing that you have to realize, I think, and I teach this a lot to a lot of folks that I work with, the end product is not for you. The end product is for a much wider audience. And so you should have, as you were building this, a sense of community around you. Some of the worst scripts that I've written, and yes, I've written some bad ones. I wrote when I kept myself in a vacuum or in a bubble, where it was just me, my own voice in my head, yada yada yada, all of that. But some of the best scripts that I've written, from people that I've collaborated with, people who I trust in the industry, who I trust their opinion, who I tell them flat out, if it's a load of crap, tell me. Don't spare my feelings.
Right.
Give me the real deal. I want to make this better if that's possible. And what that has earned me is both a degree of respect as a collaborator, but also it set me up as someone who is doing business. I'm not just trying to be a storyteller to stroke my own ego. I'm in this to be a business, to be an asset to that studio production company, that fellow writer, or if my manager even comes to me and says, "Hey, I know someone who's looking for something like this. Do you got something like that, or can you do it within the next 3 to 4 months?" And I'm like, "Yeah," because that's the job, right? Your
Right.
job is to write. Your job is to create. Your job is to tell story. And I think one of the most frustrating things I hear a lot from some screenwriters is that they'll say, because people always tell them, "Oh, just keep writing, write, 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 write." And I get it. You don't need to be writing 7 days a week. But when I hear people say, "James, I just don't want to be writing scripts for the sake of writing scripts," and I'm going, "Why not?" Because that's the job. And
Yes.
if you're looking at it from a business perspective, if McDonald's had decided that, "Oh, we just want to do French fries just today. We're not going to do French fries, anymore after today." How much money are you throwing away? And so looking at this as a perspective is you're a business. Your job is to constantly create stories. Constantly. Now, will all of those stories get made or all of those stories get sold? Probably not. But the one thing that I absolutely 100% without a shadow of a doubt know for sure, every day that you write something new, it is better than the thing that you wrote the day before.
Yes.
That is a fact.
Someone is watching or listening right now with a story in their bones, but they're scared. What do you tell them?
Fear is the enemy of every dream that you hold dear. If you are afraid to fall, jump. If you are afraid of flying, get on a plane anyway. There's a story, um, and I have remembered this story literally for the better part of 50 years. It lives in my soul. I learned it when I was in Dale Carnegie's public speaking and human relations class, and it's a story about this French Foreign Legion prisoner of war camp, and most of the guys in this camp are on death row. And on the day that they're supposed to die, the commandant would call the person into this room and tell them, "I'm going to give you a choice. You either face the firing squad or face what's behind this black door." And man after man would ultimately break down crying, sobbing like a child, and beg him to take him to the firing squad. His new lieutenant is there when the toughest man in the prison camp shows up. It's his day. It's his turn. And the commandant asks him the same question. Is it the firing squad or whatever's behind this black door? And a half an hour goes by, and this guy's just like a stone. He's like a granite stone. But then ultimately he falls apart, and the lieutenant is just stunned and amazed that as they're dragging this man off to go to his death at the firing squad, he finally asked the commandant, "What is so terrifying behind that door that men would rather go to their deaths than face it?" And the commandant asked him, "In order to answer that, I have to ask you the question. Would you rather face the firing squad or what's behind this black door?" And almost immediately, the lieutenant could feel his heart racing. He was sweating. He was palpitating, almost like he was going to pass out. And the commandant finally said, "Calm down. You don't have to make that choice. But what's behind that black door is a Jeep with a tank full of gas, an envelope with enough money to get into the next town, and papers and credentials to go anywhere you want to go in the world. What's behind that door is freedom for any man with the courage to take it. That story has lived in my soul forever. And every time I even personally still today reach a moment where I'm like, am I sure I'm going to do it? Do I really want to do this? I remember that story. And it's like, no guts, no glory, right? Doesn't mean that you're going to always going to win, but being afraid will always mean that you will never do it. And if I might drop another quick story,
Sure.
um, that probably might be even more impactful. One of the things years later, after I started picking up Eddie Gideon again, I got into motivational speaking. I listened to a lot of motivational speakers. And I heard this story by Les Brown that literally the moment I heard it, it made me pull my car over to the side of the road because I was shaking. And he said this: imagine you are on your deathbed and standing around you are all of the ideas and things that you were meant to create, every story that you were meant to write, all of those characters. And they are staring at you with large, angry eyes because now they must die with you. You could have brought them to life. You could have given them to the world, but now they have to die with you because you were afraid. And he said, ladies and gentlemen, the greatest repository for ideas is the graveyard. And that, I'm like, okay, but this is why you have to do it. If you have a story that's in you, if you really have a story that's in you, and you feel you are compelled, you are convicted to create it, don't fight that. You have no idea where that story will lead you. But more importantly, you don't have any idea who that story is going to bless. So if you don't write it, as Stephen Pressfield once said, you shame the very angels God sent to protect you. You stop us from moving one step closer to being one true race of people that loves, cares, and protects one another. And do you really want to be that dude?
We're going to flip the pressure dial. These are fast, instinct only, no overthinking. This is
Okay.
craft, mind, and madness.
Okay.
Your favorite sound,
Ooh, rain,
least favorite sound.
traffic,
When you start a script or a book, what comes first? Image, emotion, or line of dialogue?
line of dialogue,
Do you
or
build
narrative.
do you build the story from character outward or world inward, and why?
Character outward, because I believe that character-driven stories are the most important stories that we can tell. A plot or a um, plot device may eventually become outdated, but characters never do.
What breaks your writing flow faster? Forced deadlines or self-doubt?
Self-doubt.
When the story isn't working, what do you do to fix it first? Structure, stakes, or the truth?
Structure.
Do you outline heavily or write with chaos and sculpt later? And why does that work for you?
I'm a bit of a pantser, but I do like to outline. I like to outline lightly, so that I don't feel as though I'm confined to whatever that outline is. That if I make a change somewhere along the way, I can do that freely without having to worry about it or kick myself in the head.
What's more dangerous in a story? Silence or too many words?
Ooh, too many words.
The hardest scene to write: violence, grief, or love?
Grief, because you have to dive so deep to pull that out.
Why do you think humans need story? not want, need.
We need story because it is how we have learned to truly evolve. Everything good in humanity is derived from story.
Entertainment as infrastructure.
Oh, we are approaching a brand new age where we're seeing brands now want to create entertainment. They want to create movies and TV shows and podcasts and everything else because they know that that their audiences that can be harvested, if you will. But as making it as a part of infrastructure means that in order to create these things, you have to have the people to do that. And so this means jobs. This means um, tax incentives, tax revenues, all of these things that can make an otherwise small economy truly explode and blow up. And the best example of this, I didn't realize it when I first heard that, but the best example of this um, was Miami Vice.
Oh, you
Right.
know?
Miami was a sleepy retirement town where people went to retire and eventually go off into the sunset before they decided to do Miami Vice. Then, after the show came, the infrastructure, not only just from the filming of the show, but the nightlife, the entertainment, everything blew up. It even uh, um, trickled into like other entertainment venues like football and everything else. So it brought more money into the city, more people. It affected clothing, it affected culture. It created an ecosystem through one television show that then went on to um, spawn several knockoffs, including Burn Notice and three or four others, Silk Stockings, all of these shows that that had that same aesthetic. So yeah, that's a prime example of entertainment as infrastructure.
Get your script to the finish line.
Ooh, to get my script to the finish line is not the daunting task that you might think. I think once I've crossed like the halfway mark, and I know that it's literally downhill from there. The one thing that I do is I don't try and knock it out in a day. I try and like spread that excitement out over a couple of days for two reasons. One, to sort of give myself a mental break in like I've been riding this high for like 8 9 hours. I need to break off a little bit, but then to also stop at a place where I know when I come back to it the excitement is still there.
Hmm. The ism.
The ism.
Hmm.
I face a lot of isms. Ageism, probably more so than racism. um um for me it's always been interesting that people think that once you reach a certain age that like, oh, your usefulness and your value um isn't as significant, but yet I'm like, are you telling that to George R.R. Martin, who created Game of Thrones? um did you say that to Ray Bradbury? So why would you say it to me? Because I'm still out here just like trying to crank out stories left and right as often as I can.
Brilliant. I love that. What's your backup plan?
To never back up. Someone once asked me that, and that was my answer: to never ever back up.
What's the lie most beginner writers believe?
Oh, that I can do this in a certain amount of time and make $1 million. I
Is
I
writer
still hear that to this day.
is writers block real or a fear response wearing a creative mask?
It is a fear response wearing a creative mask because you cannot be afraid to go to allow your stories to take you to places that are uncomfortable. You have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable to be a great storyteller.
What skill matters more, vision or discipline?
Discipline.
Do you trust your
Always
first
discipline.
do you trust your first draft or your final edit more?
My first draft is a lie dressed in silk stockings and 3-inch pumps. I never trust that.
Mm. All
She's
right.
she's pretty. No, don't doubt. She's pretty, but she's lying. No, no.
I need your social media. Give me all of your social places where you are found,
Uh,
please.
you can find me on TikTok at Uncle James 2. I am on one more on Instagram, James Moore on Facebook. Where else am I on? One more on Blue Sky, and am I anyplace else? Oh, and James Moore on LinkedIn. Or you can find me at onemore.com or jamesmoore.com or darkanthempress.com. A lot of places.
A
Ain't
lot
too
of
hard.
places. I love that. So, my final question to you. What did you think about being on Zombiepalooza Radio Live for your first time?
Um, Please, can I come back again?
I appreciate all of that. Those were the bones. No polish, no performance, just instinct. James Moore's a kind of storyteller who doesn't write to impress, he writes to survive. And in doing so, he gives the rest of us permission to survive too. You can find his books, Black Bones Jones and Two for Pain. And if you're listening closely, you'll realize this wasn't an interview, it was a transmission. Tonight's guest was James Moore, and you're listening to Zombiepalooza Radio Live since 2012. Still here, still dark, still telling the stories they tried to bury.